Hey guys, welcome back to a new episode of Dev Drawer. Today I'm going to be going back into a quickie tutorial because I haven't done one of those in a while, and there's a few questions that I've been asked in the past. One of them being that comes up a lot is, how do I take a large amount of data from a CSV file and get it into a MySQL database, or get it into a PHP system so I can start using that code. So what I'm going to go over today is I'm going to create these little snippets that might be able to help you in the future. But before I do, if you haven't already, subscribe to the channel because there is more tutorials like this. Like this video if you like it. If you have any questions, leave something in the comments. But I think for now, I'm going to go ahead and get started. So first thing we want to do is I want to create a CSV file using Microsoft Word, or not Microsoft Word, but Microsoft Excel. You don't necessarily have to use Excel. You can use an online program. You can use OpenOffice. Pretty much any of those programs will work. And essentially what I'm going to do is create a CSV file that has first name, last name in it. And I'm going to do that real quick outside of the window so you won't be able to see it. But I'm going to take this CSV file and I'm going to add it to our file system over here. And essentially, if you look at it, it's just a comma delimited file. So CSV stands for comma separated variables, I believe. But essentially, it's just the IDs that are associated with it, which you don't even need if you don't want to. I'll show you how to do it with or without that. And then it's just a comma that separates all the items. So if we wanted to, we can come in here and add a third column that would be for email. So we could do like test@example.com, and essentially we're going to take this CSV file and import it into where we can populate an array with it, and then we're going to take that array and I'll show you some pretty cool things that you can do with that array. So let's get rid of this for now because I'm just going to be focusing on the first name and last name fields. So let's get into the code. The code is relatively simple. I've already created a CSV import on WAMP. If you want to know how to do that, I have a few other videos where I go over in detail how to create a local WAMP installation and how to set it up to use virtual like .local and stuff like that. So you can go in there and see how that's done pretty easily. So I'm not going to dive too much into that. Let me get my file open so I can stay on track. Alright, so first thing we're going to do is we're going to create an index.php file, and this is where our functionality is going to happen. So as you can see over here in our Chrome window, there's currently nothing there, but we refresh, we have our blank index.php file. And inside of our index.php file, we are going to use the fgetcsv, which is a function for PHP to pull information from a CSV file. So let me show you how to set that up. And depending on which what operating system you're using, this next line will be important or it may not be important. So we're going to use something called ini set. And this is just going to set a variable for the php.ini to run in real time. And this is only if you have a Mac, just because the encoding part of it is done a little bit differently on a Mac than it is on Windows. So even though we're using a Windows machine, I'm going to go ahead and add this so you can see this. So we're going to do auto, let's put that in single quotes. So auto detect line endings. And that's just going to make it where it knows kind of a little bit better what the line endings are, because like I said, it's going to be encoded differently depending on what operating system you are using. Alright, so once we have that set, it's pretty easy to get something from a CSV file. So we're going to create a variable, we're going to call it CSV, and then we're going to do fopen, which is part of the fgetcsv functionality. And we're going to link to this test.csv file that we have on there. So test.csv, or you can have it point to wherever you want it to go at, and then we're going to put it in read-only mode. So because we're not going to be editing this CSV file right now, we're just going to be reading the data from it. So now that we've opened the CSV file, what we're going to do is we're going to set up a while loop to loop through each one of the rows that are inside of that CSV file. So we're going to create a variable called row, which is pretty self-explanatory. It's essentially one row inside of the CSV file, which for us would be the first name and the last name. and then we're going to use fgetcsv, and then we're going to pass this CSV variable, and then we're going to say if the row is not blank. So let's do if not equal to false, we are going to then run the while loop, and let's go ahead and close that out. And essentially what we're going to do is we're just going to have a blank array that grabs that row. And since we're using the false variable up here, we're going to come up here and say array is just blank, or it's a blank array. So that way we don't have any potential errors whenever we go to run it if there's nothing there. Okay, so now we've gotten everything out inside of the CSV into an array, so we're going to do fclose, and we're going to close out that CSV file so it's no longer needed, so it doesn't remain open. So what we can do right now is we can do a print on this array. So let's make it pretty, so we're going to do echo pre in order to get those, make it a way it's a little bit easier to read. And then we're simply just going to do print our array. Now if we come up back over here and refresh our page, we now see that everything in the CSV file is being pulled into a array. As you can see here, the first row that we have in our CSV file is fname, lname. If you do not want that in there, you can simply just remove it. If you do want to keep it in there, what I would recommend doing so it doesn't convolute your data any is just to add an unset to remove that part of the array. So let's go over here and do unset, and then we're going to do array 0, because that's going to be the first part that gets pulled, which is going to be this entire record. We just want to remove it from this array. And again, you don't have to do it this way. You can actually just remove it from the CSV file and it'll work out just fine where your information will be populated first. So we refresh, now that part of it's gone, and it starts with our naming scheme that we have on there. So now that we have this, let's do something with the data. So I don't like the way it says 0 and 1 here, so what I actually wanted to say is fname and lname, so that we know that those columns are actually being used for something. So since we're getting rid of that first array value, we're going to do a for each loop, and we're going to create a secondary array that takes everything inside of this simple array and pushes it out into a format that's a little bit easier for us to work with in the future. So I'm going to go ahead and just comment this out for now, and we're going to add a section down here. It's going to be for each array as key, because we still want the values, the 7, 8, 9, 1, 2, 3. We want those to stay where they're at, but we want to be able to change the information that's contained inside of that array to be able to push out that fname, lname keys that are associated with each array. That's a lot to take in. Hopefully that made sense. So it'll make more sense whenever I get done doing it. So let's go ahead and end our for each loop, and then inside of our for each loop we're just going to create a new array, and let's call it new, and then we're going to be passing that key. So the key will stay the same, but we want to pass a new variable called fname, and then we're going to make that point to the single 0 that's being pushed across, which would be something like this. So this is the 0 key, this is the 1 key. We want this to be fname and lname. So let's come over here, we're going to copy this, and we're going to change this to a 1, and we're going to change this to an lname. So let's see what we got here so far, and instead of printing out the array, we're going to print out new, and we should be able to refresh the screen. And oh, it's because I got it commented out. Let's uncomment that, and now we should be able to refresh the screen. There we go. So now we have fname and lname. So it's a little bit easier for us to work with in the future. So what's pretty cool about this is that we can modify our CSV file. So let me do that real quick in the back end. You won't be able to see what I'm doing right now, but just bear with me. I'm going to add something to it. And I'm just going to add a new column called email. and then I'm just going to make all of the emails the same. So test@example.com, and I'm just going to drag that down for all of them. Okay, so now I'm going to save it, and we don't have it where it's currently calling that information yet. So if we want to, we can now add a new variable, and we're going to change this to 2 because the key is going to increment, and we change this to email. And if we refresh this screen now, we have the email addresses that are coming across as an array from a CSV file. So last thing I want to show you for this quickie tutorial is what do you do with this information once you got it. So it's pretty cool what you can do with it. You can do a lot of things with it, but I'm going to show you real quick how to add it to a database. I'm not going to create the database connection and actually create the database or anything like that, but I'm going to show you how to use object-oriented programming and parameters and stuff like that to be able to loop through this array. So let's go in here, and instead of displaying it like that, we're going to create our statement. And this would come after you've created your database connection and set up what your database is and all this kind of stuff. But for right now, I'm just going to write the statement out so you can see how to loop through this array to be able to push it out to your database. So we're going to do DB, which would be the database parameter name that we've created that we're not going to create in this tutorial. And if you want to see how to do this in a little more detail, you can actually look at one of our other videos. We've done a lot of database connections in our previous videos, especially the CRUD interface, and that'll show you how to connect to a database using MySQLi and object-oriented programming and stuff like that. So for right now, just pretend that we have a database connection and it's active, and this is what you would type in order to get that to work. So if we wanted to, we could come in here and insert an entire record set into our database by simply doing insert into let's call it users, and then we're going to update a fname, lname, and an email address field, and then we're going to pass these values that we don't currently know what they are yet by using question marks. And then once we have that, we are going to bind these parameters. So we're going to do statement bind param, and then we're going to pass a string for the fname, a string for the lname, and a string for the email address. I don't know why I keep switching up my programming. And then we're going to pass fname, lname, and email. And then that's the binding of the parameters. So now what's the really cool part of how we got the array set up is that we can do a for each. So we do a for each new, because that's what we called it up here, is new. For each new as single, and then we're going to add those parameters that it's looking for. So let's do in for each, and then we're going to do fname, because we got fname, lname, and email. We're going to do fname equals single fname, and then I'm just going to copy this down, change this to lname, email, and finally email. So this reflects the database column names as well as what we have them named here. So fname, lname, email, fname, lname, email. Same here, fname, lname, email, which reflects fname, lname, email. And basically what this is going to do, it's going to loop through each one of our records, and then it's going to bind these parameters. So once we get the parameters binded, what we need to do is execute our statement. So we do statement execute, execute, and then that's all we need to do inside of our for each loop. Wait, can't have an equal sign there. There we go. And then we need to close out the statement, and then finally we close out the database. And then db close. So essentially what we did is we've imported a CSV file, put it into an array, removed the header of the CSV file to just have the values that we want, and then we took those values, we created a new array and placed them in using the keys that we wanted to, so we didn't have to reference everything like this, which you could. I mean, you don't have to do this part of it. It's just a little bit of an easier way to keep everything in order, but you can actually reference 0, 1, and 2 instead of fname, lname, and email, and it would still do the same thing. And then we created a statement that's going to insert these users one at a time into a database that we've created, and it's going to bind these parameters using object-oriented programming, and then we're going to execute that statement inside of this for each loop from this new array that we've created, and then finally close our database and close our statement. So if I refresh the screen right now, it's going to error out because there's not a database connection and it's looking for one, and as you can see here, it's just not going to work. But if we had a database connection here, it would give us a result it would give us a blank result because we don't have anything echoing out. But if we connected it to a database and we looked at it, we could actually see all of these values inside of a database. So to summarize everything that we went over, if you ever had a very large data set stored in an access file or it's stored in a CSV file and you want to make it a little bit more dynamic so that you can program around it without having to do VB code or anything like that, you could actually take what you have in that CSV file and save it to a file on your server, run this code, connect it to a database, and now you have all of that information that was in that CSV file. Now it's completely available to you to be able to manipulate, to be able to email to be able to modify, add it as part of your CRUD system, whatever you want it to do. So hopefully you learned something from this. I think I'm going to do a few of these quickies every now and then just to kind of get some things that people have been asking me, how do you do this, how do you do this. I think this is something that it's not as detailed as the other ones, but it is something that a lot of people ask for. I think maybe the next time I do a quickie, I will show you how to take what's inside of a database and then export it as a CSV file, so you can create something that people can download as an Excel file or a CSV file so they can open it up in Word, generate their own reports, whatever they need to do. But for now, that's going to be it. If you like the video, hit the thumbs up for me. Leave me a comment and let me know what you'd like me to do my next video on. I have a few ideas. I'm going to go back to the Sammy.js. I just wanted to do this because it's something that's popped up more than once last week that I would like to talk about. So if you have any other things that you just want to see a video on how to do, let me know. But I think for now, this is going to be it, and I appreciate you watching, and I'll talk to you later.